My name is Elena, and I never thought a family birthday could break me like this. We'd been invited to my parents' house to celebrate my niece's birthday, a big backyard party, a clown, a cake, all those things kids usually love. My 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, was excited the entire drive there. She talked about the cake, the games, even what she'd say to wish her cousin happy birthday. She was a little loud, yes, but she was just happy. As soon as we stepped through the gate, I felt that familiar tension in my chest. My parents were smiling, but there was always something conditional about their love. And my brother Tom, the so-called golden boy, he acted like he owned the place, as usual. I tried to ignore the sense of dread, telling myself, this is just a kid's party. Nothing will happen. Play nice. For the first hour, things were fine. Sophie was running around, laughing, chasing bubbles with the other kids. She might have squealed a little too loudly once or twice, but what child doesn't? I was chatting with my cousin when I heard it. A sharp, ugly sound that made my stomach twist. Slap. Everything went silent. I spun around, and there she was. Sophie, standing frozen, one hand pressed to her cheek, tears already spilling. My brother Tom had his hand still half raised, like he'd just swatted away a fly. She was too loud, he sneered, shrugging like he'd done the world a favor. It felt like the air left my body. I ran to Sophie and pulled her close, checking her face. The red mark stood out so bright against her soft skin, I wanted to vomit. "Tom, what the hell is wrong with you?" I screamed. And then, I'll never forget this until the day I die, my parents laughed. They actually laughed. My mother waved her hand dismissively, chuckling, "She's just dramatic, Elena. She's fine. Don't start." Don't start? My daughter had just been slapped. Before I go on, if you love emotionally intense, real-life inspired revenge stories like this, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. It really helps grow the channel, and you won't believe what happens next in this story. I pulled Sophie closer, my hands shaking. She was sobbing, her whole body trembling. She looked up at me with those terrified eyes, and in that moment, something inside me broke. I could feel a rage I had never experienced before, rising in my chest like a tidal wave. Tom just kept standing there, smirking. "She should learn how to behave," he told me, as if slapping a child was a lesson in manners. Sophie's tiny voice broke through my fury, the softest, most heartbreaking sound I've ever heard. "Mommy, why does Grandpa think it's funny?" My parents kept laughing, telling the other relatives to calm down because kids are resilient. I wanted to scream at them, tear their entire world apart, but I was stuck, surrounded. It felt like every eye in that yard was on me, waiting to see what I'd do. My pulse thundered in my ears. I looked at my little girl's tear-streaked face, and I made a silent promise right then and there. No one, not Tom, not even my parents, would ever hurt my daughter again. But I couldn't react yet, not with so many people watching. I had to hold it in, at least for this moment, because something deep inside told me this was only the beginning, and I would get my revenge, no matter what it cost. Sophie wiped her tears and asked me again, her lip trembling, "Mommy, why does Grandpa think it's funny?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophie's tearful face, the angry red mark on her cheek, and the cruel, dismissive laughter of my parents echoing in my head. I kept replaying it over and over, wondering how I'd let it happen, wondering if I'd failed her somehow. The next morning, I sat with Sophie at the breakfast table, trying to coax her to eat a bite of toast. She wouldn't. She just picked at it, silent, eyes blank. That sparkle, my Sophie's bright, fearless spirit, was gone. I wanted to scream. My phone buzzed on the counter, and I flinched at the sound. It was my husband, Daniel, texting to check in. "How's Sophie? What happened yesterday?" She was crying on the way home. I hesitated before answering. Part of me was terrified to tell him the truth. Would he think I was weak for not stepping in more forcefully? Would he think I'd let them hurt her? But I forced myself to type it out. "Tom slapped her." My parents laughed. They called her dramatic. Daniel called me immediately. His voice was hard, shaking with rage. "Elena, if you don't stand up for our daughter, I will." His words struck me like lightning. Stand up for our daughter. Wasn't that what I was supposed to do? Hadn't I sworn to protect her from everything? But how could I, when my own family was the threat? I promised him I'd handle it. I had to. If I didn't, I'd never forgive myself. Later that afternoon, I drove to my parents' house alone. I was still shaking when I rang the bell. My mother opened the door, acting like nothing had happened. She even smiled. "Oh, Elena, you're here. Want some tea?" Tea? Was she serious? I walked straight in, searching for Tom. He was sprawled on the couch, watching TV, not a care in the world, like nothing had happened. I stood in front of him, blocking his view. "We need to talk," I said. He rolled his eyes. "About what? Your precious kid's tantrum?" My hands clenched into fists. "You hit my daughter. You slapped her, Tom, and you're sitting here laughing about it." He didn't even blink. She was being loud. Someone had to teach her respect. I felt the ground tilt beneath me, like reality was splitting open. This was my brother, the boy I'd grown up with. And he was talking about hitting my daughter as if it was normal. My mother came over, placing a gentle hand on Tom's shoulder like she was protecting him. "Elena, please," she sighed. "Don't overreact. He barely touched her. You're going to ruin the family over one little misunderstanding?" One little misunderstanding? I looked back and forth between them, and for the first time in my life, I truly saw them. The coldness, the favoritism, the way they'd always protected Tom no matter what. I remembered being 8 myself and how I was always too emotional, always too sensitive. They hadn't changed at all, and they never would. But I would. I turned to leave, my voice shaking but steady. "I'm not letting this go. You will never lay a hand on my daughter again." Tom laughed behind me. "Or what? You'll cry to your husband?" My mother joined in, her laughter like knives against my skin. "You're so dramatic, Elena. Just like your kid." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. When I got back to my car, I broke down. Hot tears poured down my cheeks as I gripped the steering wheel. But this wasn't just sadness anymore. It was rage. A rage that would burn everything they thought they could get away with. And I would feed that fire. As I wiped my tears away, I heard Sophie's voice in my mind, so small and broken. "Mommy, if you won't protect me, who will?" That question would haunt me and drive me until I had an answer. The next few days felt like living inside a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every time I looked at Sophie, I saw that faint bruise on her cheek. Even after it started to fade, it burned in my mind like a scar that would never heal. She was different now. Quieter. She clung to me constantly, wouldn't play music out loud, wouldn't even laugh too much. It was like she was afraid her joy might get her punished. That broke me more than anything. I knew I had to do something. But the second I tried, I ran straight into the wall that was my family. It started with the phone call. My mother rang while I was trying to get Sophie to do her homework, her voice sugary sweet. "Elena, we need to talk about Sunday," she began. I braced myself. "Yeah, we do." She sighed dramatically, as if I were the one who had hurt a child. "Honey, you're blowing this out of proportion. Tom barely tapped her. She was shrieking, you know how she gets. You embarrassed everyone by overreacting." Overreacting? My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "She was slapped across the face, Mom. She's terrified." "That's not a tap," I shouted, my voice cracking. My mother kept her cool. She always did. "Children are resilient, Elena. You're being dramatic. If you keep pushing this, you'll break the family apart." Break the family apart? As if protecting Sophie was worse than letting her be smacked. "Mom, I'm not going to pretend this is okay," I said, fighting to keep my voice from shaking. Her tone turned icy. "If you tell outsiders about this, you'll destroy our family's reputation. You want that on your conscience?" That was their game. gaslight me, deny it happened, then shame me into silence. It had worked on me before. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Later that night, Daniel sat beside me on the couch while I tried to calm my breathing. "You look like you're about to snap," he said gently. "I am," I confessed. "They want me to stay quiet." He shook his head, eyes dark. "If you don't fight back, they'll think they can do anything." I nodded, though I felt a sick knot in my stomach. He was right. But I was terrified. Terrified of losing my family, even though they'd shown me so little love. Terrified of Sophie growing up thinking I was too weak to stand up for her. Because if I let this go, what did that teach my daughter? That night, I checked on Sophie as she slept. She was curled up so small, hugging her stuffed bear, breathing in shallow little sighs. I reached out and brushed the hair from her forehead, tears stinging my eyes. "Mommy, if you won't protect me, who will?" That question haunted me every minute of every day. My phone buzzed again. A text from Tom this time. "Get over it. Kids bounce back." I wanted to smash the phone against the wall. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to think, to plan. Because if they were going to bury this, if they were going to pretend Sophie's pain didn't matter, then I would do whatever it took to make them see. I wouldn't let them rewrite what happened. I wouldn't let them destroy Sophie's trust in me. I had no idea exactly how to fight them yet. But I would find a way. For Sophie. For every part of me that they had belittled all my life. I kissed Sophie's cheek before I left her room and whispered, "I will protect you, I promise." Didn't want to believe it, but Sophie had changed. A week ago, she would have been singing around the house, dancing in the living room, making silly jokes with me. Now, she barely spoke. Every time a loud sound happened, even something as harmless as a car horn, she flinched like a startled kitten. It was a punch to the gut every single time. One night, I tried to get her to play a card game with me. I was desperate to see even a flicker of her old spark. She looked at me with sad, hollow eyes and whispered, "Mommy, will Uncle Tom be there?" My heart sank. "No, sweetheart. You're safe here." She nodded, but I could see she didn't believe me. That was when I knew this was bigger than one slap. It had stolen her sense of safety, and that was something I couldn't let stand. Daniel saw it too. Over dinner, he watched Sophie push food around her plate, and then set down her fork. He waited until she left the table to say what I'd been dreading. "Elena," he said quietly, "she's not okay. We have to fix this." "I know," I whispered. He set his jaw. "Then we confront them. All of them." My stomach twisted. "They'll just deny everything. They'll say we're making drama." Daniel leaned closer, fierce and steady. "Then let them call it drama. At least Sophie will see we stood up for her." That hit me like a lightning bolt. He was right. If we did nothing, Sophie would grow up thinking being mistreated was normal, that people could hurt her and laugh about it and her mother would stay quiet. I could never let that be her lesson. 2 days later, I agreed to meet my parents for lunch. Tom showed up, of course, looking smug and unbothered, like he'd already forgotten everything. We sat at the restaurant, tense and cold, and Sophie stayed pressed to my side like she was glued there. I couldn't even taste my food. My hands were shaking under the table. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Tom," I started, voice trembling, "you hit my daughter. You humiliated her. You terrified her. And you laughed. Don't you dare tell me that's nothing." He snorted. "Oh, come on. She was screaming her head off. Shut up!" I snapped. "You hurt her. You hurt her. And you think that's discipline? You think you had that right?" My father interrupted sharply. "Elena, enough. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. Do you really want to start a war in this family?" I looked them all in the eye. If standing up for my daughter means war, then yes, I want a war. My mom tried to smooth it over, a sickly sweet smile on her face. "Elena, you're overreacting. Tom meant well." "Meant well?" I nearly choked on the words. He slapped a child in the face. Tom crossed his arms. "You should thank me. You're raising a brat, and I did you a favor." That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I stood up, hands shaking, my chair scraping the floor so loud half the restaurant turned to look. I pointed at Tom, then at my parents. "You will regret ever laying a hand on my child. Ever thinking you could break her spirit and get away with it? I'm done playing your games." My father tried to hush me, but I was past being silenced. Sophie gripped my hand tightly, eyes wide but full of something new. Hope. "I'm not scared of you anymore," I told them. "And Sophie never will be either." Tom laughed, cruel and careless, but I didn't even flinch. After that restaurant showdown, something inside me turned cold and sharp. I'd spent my entire life twisting myself into knots to please my parents, to keep the peace, to protect the so-called family harmony. But all it had ever done was leave me powerless, and now it had hurt my child. That was over. Sophie needed me to be stronger than I'd ever been, and I refused to let her down. That night, after I put Sophie to bed, I sat in the dark with Daniel. I could barely look at him because the guilt in my chest was a boulder crushing my ribs. "Elena," he said gently, "what are you going to do?" I swallowed hard. "I'm going to make sure they never touch her again. Never shame her again. Never laugh at her pain." He nodded, eyes steely. "What's your plan?" I took a deep breath. It felt terrifying even to say it out loud. "I'm going to expose them. Every lie, every story, every time they tried to break me. I'm going to let the whole family see what they really are." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he reached over and took my hand. "I'm with you," he said. It was the strength I needed. The first step was gathering proof. I'd never really spoken about Tom's pattern of cruelty because it always felt too shameful, but now I realized silence was exactly what had kept him powerful. I started by sitting Sophie down with me. I recorded her, gently asking her to talk about what happened. Her voice was so small, so fragile, it nearly broke me in half, but I didn't interrupt. She needed to have her say. Then I called a few cousins, the ones who'd seen Tom bully other children over the years. I asked them to tell me their stories. I recorded those, too. It was like pulling poison from a wound, one infection after another finally spilling out into the light. While I gathered these pieces, I felt myself growing stronger. Each confession was like a brick in a wall I was building, a wall that would protect Sophie and finally keep my parents' twisted idea of family from infecting her life. But I was still terrified. One night, as I listened back to Sophie's recording, I broke down. Hearing her tiny voice describe how scared she was made me want to scream. I had to leave the room, my hands shaking, my throat too tight to breathe. Daniel followed me out to the hallway. "Hey," he said, putting his arms around me. "If this is too much—" "No," I interrupted. "This is exactly what I have to do." He kissed my forehead, and for the first time in days, I felt something like hope. But I couldn't stop replaying my mother's words. "If you tell outsiders, you'll destroy this family." That was the point. I was ready to burn the fake version of our family to ashes if it meant keeping Sophie safe. A few days later, I called everyone to a family dinner. I told them it was time to talk things out. I could practically hear my mother's relief over the phone, thinking I'd given up, ready to sweep it under the rug. They had no idea what was coming. Sophie was nervous, clinging to my hand as we got ready to leave. I knelt down in front of her and looked her right in the eye. "You're brave," I told her. "You don't have to be scared anymore." She nodded, but her lip trembled. "Will he yell at me again?" "No," I promised. "He won't." The night of the family dinner, my stomach was a fist of tangled nerves. I kept glancing at Sophie in the rearview mirror as we drove. She was clutching her teddy bear, quiet, her eyes big and wary. I wanted to pull the car over, wrap her in my arms, and promise her this would all be over soon. But I couldn't stop now. Daniel squeezed my hand before we got out of the car. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "I've got you." I nodded, took a deep breath, and led Sophie into my parents' house. Everything looked so normal. Too normal. The dining table was laid out beautifully, my mother bustling around with serving dishes, wearing that same forced plastic smile. Tom was already sitting at the head of the table, arms folded like he was king of this poisoned little kingdom. I felt the walls closing in, but I kept going. "Welcome," my father boomed. "Let's have a peaceful evening, please." Peaceful. That word tasted like poison. We sat down, and for a moment it was all polite conversation and forced laughter. Sophie stayed glued to my side, barely breathing. I kept my hand on her back, trying to show her I wasn't leaving her alone. Then, halfway through the meal, I couldn't stand the charade anymore. I stood up. "I invited you all here tonight," I said, my voice shaking at first but growing steadier with each word, "because we need to talk about what happened." Tom rolled his eyes. "Not this again." I raised my hand to stop him. "Yes, this again. You slapped my daughter, and you laughed about it." My parents stiffened, shifting uncomfortably. My mother tried to hush me. "Elena, please, there are other people here." "That's exactly why I'm talking about it," I cut in, my voice like ice. I took out my phone and pressed play on the recording. Sophie's tiny voice filled the room, describing in painful detail how Tom had slapped her, how everyone had laughed, how she'd felt worthless. Tom's face went pale. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. I let the recording play. Even though my hands were shaking so badly, I thought I might drop the phone. Daniel stood behind me, a silent shield, daring anyone to interrupt. When the recording ended, I looked at each of them in turn. "You will never rewrite what happened. You will never tell her she's exaggerating again. You will never silence her, ever." My father's voice trembled with anger. "How could you bring this filth into our family dinner?" "Because it is our family," I shot back. "This is what you all turned into. A place where hitting a child is a joke." Tom slammed his fist on the table. "You're trying to ruin me." I met his gaze, unflinching. "You did that yourself." Sophie squeezed my arm, her little voice so quiet I almost missed it. "Mommy, I'm scared." I crouched down to her level, right there in front of everyone. "You don't have to be scared anymore. I'm here. I will always be here." Tom stood, raging, looking like he might lunge across the table. Daniel stepped forward instantly, blocking him. "Don't even think about it," Daniel warned. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in Tom's eyes. My parents tried to smooth it over again, their voices trembling. "Elena, don't do this. We can talk privately." "No," I said, my voice deadly calm. "The time for secrets is over." They could feel it. Their old tricks wouldn't work anymore. I saw it in their faces, the way they finally realized I wouldn't play along. For a moment after I shut off my phone, there was total silence. The kind of silence that feels like the air itself is holding its breath. Sophie pressed into my side, wide-eyed, while Tom glared at me with a rage I'd never seen before. The kind of rage a bully feels when he realizes his power is slipping away. My mother spoke first, her voice trembling with false calm. "Elena, you don't have to do this in front of everyone. Let's go in the other room. Talk like a family." "No," I cut her off. "No more closed-door talks. No more covering things up." Tom stood up so fast his chair clattered backward. "You think you can come here and humiliate me? You think you can air our dirty laundry and get away with it?" I met his eyes steady. "It's not dirty laundry, it's the truth." He took a step toward me, fists clenched, but Daniel was already in front of me, blocking his path. Tom's nostrils flared, but he backed down, jaw twitching. I turned to face the rest of my relatives, their shocked faces lined up around the table. "You all needed to hear what happened. You needed to hear Sophie's voice, because you all sat there while it happened. You laughed. You looked away. That ends today." My father shook his head, voice cracking. "Elena, you're destroying this family." I felt my lip tremble, but I didn't let it break me. "Then it deserves to be destroyed." My mother gasped. "How can you say that?" Because a family that protects a child abuser isn't a family, I shot back. It's a cult of silence, and I won't raise my daughter in it. Tom barked out a cruel laugh. You think anyone cares? You think anyone will take your side? I swallowed my fear and forced myself to stand tall. I don't care whose side they take, because I am on Sophie's side, and that is enough. He scoffed, but I saw something in his eyes then, a flicker of uncertainty. The same uncertainty I'd felt all my life whenever they made me doubt my own truth. Now it was his turn to doubt. I took a step forward. I've collected every story about what you've done, Tom. From me. From other kids you bullied. From cousins who were too afraid to speak. You've left a trail, and I'm going to shine a light on every piece of it. My father slammed his palm on the table. You wouldn't dare. I didn't even flinch. Try me. Tom's face went red, then white, then red again. You're finished, he spat. No one will forgive you for this. Daniel laughed, low and steady. No one needs to forgive her. She's protecting her child. Tom lunged suddenly, reaching for me across the table. I gasped, frozen for a heartbeat. But Daniel moved faster, grabbing Tom's wrist and twisting it back until Tom howled. Don't you ever touch her again, Daniel growled. I grabbed Sophie, holding her close, my heart slamming against my ribs. For the first time, my mother looked truly afraid. What are you going to do, Elena? She asked, voice tiny. I stared her down. I'm going to tell the truth, over and over to anyone who will listen. And you will learn to live with it. As I turned to leave, Sophie's hand tucked safely in mine, I heard Tom hiss behind me. This isn't over. And I knew he meant it. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. The next morning, the phone started ringing before I'd even finished my coffee. My parents. Over and over. I let it ring. I couldn't talk to them. Not after the way they'd tried to bury Sophie's pain. Not after the way they'd watched Tom lunge at me and still tried to defend him. I had no intention of going back to that. Sophie was still asleep in my bed, curled up in a tiny ball like she was trying to make herself disappear. It broke me every time I looked at her, but at least now she knew I was on her side. That mattered more than anything. Daniel sat across from me, watching me process the chaos. They're going to try to spin this, he warned. I nodded. Let them. The truth is out now. They can lie all they want. I won't play along anymore. He reached for my hand. I'm proud of you. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to cry again. I was done wasting tears on people who thought my daughter's pain was funny. An hour later, messages started pouring in from cousins and aunts who'd been at the dinner. Some of them were shocked, some were angry, but more than a few wrote, "We saw what Tom did. We just didn't know how to stop it." That both comforted and enraged me. How many times had people looked the other way? How many times had I looked the other way, all those years ago when Tom picked on other kids and my parents told me to stay silent? Not anymore. Around noon, there was a knock at my door. Sophie ran to hide behind me as I opened it. My father stood on the porch, hat in his hands, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Elena, he began, voice shaking. We need to fix this. People are talking. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing, that was the word he used. Not wrong, not shameful, just embarrassing. I stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind me so Sophie wouldn't hear. I'm not interested in fixing anything, I told him. Tom is dangerous. You all laughed when he hit my child. That's not something you fix with a handshake and a plate of cookies. My father looked desperate. What do you want from us? I took a slow breath, letting the rage settle into something cold and clear. I want you to understand that Sophie comes first, that she will never set foot in your house again unless she feels safe. And if you try to spin this around, if you try to shame her, I will make sure everyone knows what you allowed. His shoulders slumped. For once, the great patriarch had no answer. I see, he mumbled. I turned to leave, but paused. One more thing. If Tom so much as looks at my daughter again, I will go straight to the police. I'm done protecting him. His face fell. He's your brother. I looked him dead in the eye. And Sophie is my child. When I went back inside, Daniel wrapped me in a hug so tight I could finally breathe. That night, Sophie crawled into my lap, her arms twining around my neck. "Mommy," she whispered, "are they going to hurt me again?" I stroked her hair, my voice firm. "No, baby. I promise you. No one will ever hurt you like that again." For the first time since the slap, I saw a tiny spark of relief in her eyes. But as I put her to bed, my phone buzzed with a single text from Tom. "This isn't over." And I knew he meant every word. The moment I saw Tom's message, "This isn't over," my stomach twisted, but I refused to let fear take over again. He had bullied me my entire life, and now he wanted to keep intimidating me, even after everything. No, that chapter was finished. I put my phone down and went to check on Sophie. She was sleeping soundly for the first time in weeks, her breathing calm, no nightmares pulling her awake. Watching her, I felt something shift inside me. The fear I'd carried my entire life, of my parents' disappointment, of Tom's cruelty, of being called dramatic and difficult, fell away, piece by piece. Sophie was safe. I had made her safe. And that was worth losing the entire family for. The next day, Daniel and I sat down with Sophie and talked to her gently, making sure she understood everything had changed. "You don't ever have to go back there if you don't want to," I told her. "It's your choice." Her eyes went wide, hopeful. "Really?" "Really," I promised. She smiled, a tiny, fragile smile, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed she would heal. Over the next few days, word of the dinner confrontation spread through our extended family like wildfire. Some people called me dramatic, ungrateful, destroying family bonds. Others quietly supported me, telling me they wished they'd had the same courage. For once, I didn't care what anyone thought. My parents tried calling again, sending messages about how sorry they were, how they'd make things right, begging me to bring Sophie over. I didn't even respond. They'd laughed at my child's pain. There was no coming back from that. A week later, a letter arrived from my mother, long and desperate, full of excuses. "Family sticks together," she wrote. "Don't tear us apart." I folded it neatly and dropped it straight into the trash. Family doesn't protect abusers. Family doesn't laugh at an 8-year-old being slapped. Family doesn't gaslight and shame and silence the people it's supposed to love. No. They had lost the right to call themselves my family. From now on, it would be me, Daniel, and Sophie. We were enough. That weekend, I took Sophie to the park. I watched her climb the jungle gym, laughing again, that sparkle returning to her eyes. I sat on the bench, tears streaming down my face, but this time they were tears of relief. We were free. Daniel sat beside me, his arm warm and steady around my shoulders. "I'm proud of you," he whispered again. I nodded. "I'm proud of her," I said, pointing to Sophie as she swung higher and higher, fearless. For the first time, she was learning that her voice mattered, that she deserved to be safe. That was the greatest revenge I could ever take. Breaking the chain of silence and showing my daughter a new way to live. After the park, we went out for ice cream, something sweet and silly to wash away all the bitterness of the last few weeks. Sophie giggled at the rainbow sprinkles, and my heart felt light again. As we drove home, my phone buzzed once more, another message from Tom. I ignored it. He'd lost. Final lines. I pulled into our driveway, looked back at Sophie, and promised myself, and her, one last thing. No one would ever teach my daughter to be silent again. If Tom, my parents, or anyone else wanted to come for us, they'd find a woman who no longer feared them. A woman willing to burn every bridge to protect her child. And for the first time in my life, I was at peace.